At the mouth of the Yellow River sits one of China's largest oil fields. China's growing economy needs more and more energy, but to produce energy, it needs water.
China just pulled off another astonishing engineering feat, and trust me, this one is on a whole new level. Picture this: billions of tons of soil sucked out from beneath a river, all for one massive project. This kind of project would seem impossible to another country, but not for China. You see, China has this habit of taking on projects that make the rest of the world seem illiterate. Remember the Great Wall, those futuristic megacities? They are all insane structures, but this might just top them all. Not only did they carve out an enormous underground space, but what they built inside was what really changed the game. So, how did they do it? Why did they do it? And most importantly, was it worth the insane effort? Let's see why this project is nothing short of a modern engineering miracle. Jinan. Now, if you don't know much about Jinan, let me fill you in first. Jinan is a bustling metropolis with nearly 9 million people calling it home. It is bisected by the formidable Yellow River. Now, this isn't just any river. It's the 5,400-kilometer-long Mother River of China. The Yellow River holds the title of cradling ancient civilizations for thousands of years. But here's the twist. While it's been a lifeline to many, it has also been a colossal barrier when it comes to transportation. Historically, getting across the Yellow River has been a nightmare. Sure, there are bridges, but not nearly enough for a city growing at the speed Jinan was. Traffic jams? Constant. Travel time? Frustrating. The whole setup was outdated. So what did China do? They didn't just build another bridge. No, they went full next-level mode and decided to tunnel under the river itself. Yes, under a river known for massive floods, shifting silt, and unpredictable currents. Sounds impossible, right? Well, not for China. They made it happen. And here's where things start to get wild. They excavated billions of tons of soil to pull this off. Imagine carving a tiny hole beneath one of the most notorious rivers in history without causing a disaster. Jinan's urban challenges. All right, as much as Jinan has been growing rapidly, it has been stuck, literally. The city has been booming, its economy is thriving, but there's just one little problem. It can't grow south. Why? Because there's a giant wall of mountains in the way. Now, as we have seen, Jinan isn't some tiny backwater town. It's a mega city, and it's expanding fast. More businesses, more industries, more traffic. But without space to grow, everything gets squeezed. Prices go up, roads get clogged, and infrastructure, well, it struggles to keep up. And you'd think, well, just expand north then, if only it were that simple. See, the Yellow River slices right through the city, acting like a massive natural barrier. So, while the south is packed tight, the north still has land to spare. But there's no easy way to connect the two. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a huge economic bottleneck. The northern districts have over 100 square kilometers of prime real estate waiting to be developed. But without proper links to the city center, businesses hesitate, investors hold back, and that land, wasted potential. And here's the kicker. Jinan tried to fix this before. Bridges? Already built a few, but they don't cut it. Traffic still crawls. More roads? Same problem. The city needed something big, something that would blast through these limitations and finally connect north and south properly. And that's exactly where the Jinan Yellow River Tunnel comes in. This tunnel isn't just a shortcut, it's a game changer. A two-level monster that carries both a highway and a subway, slashing travel times and unlocking an entire region for development. But how do you even dig under a river like this? And what did it take to pull off such an insane engineering feat? Well, buckle up, because the next part is wild. Tunnel design and engineering feats. See, most tunnels are just tunnels, right? A hole through the ground, you drive through, end of story. But Jinan's Yellow River Tunnel is something else. China looked at regular tunnels and said, "It's not enough. Let's double it." This beast has two levels, one for cars and trucks, and another for a high-speed metro line. That's like stacking a motorway on top of a bullet train, but still under a raging river. Yes, this thing is an absolute engineering flex. Now here's where things get interesting. Normally, when you build an underwater tunnel, you deal with water pressure, unstable soil, and the fact that water really wants to get in. Most engineers go with a single-level structure to keep it simple. But the Chinese engineers wanted to outbeat their competition. They went full overachiever mode. They needed a way to move cars and people separately without digging two tunnels, so they just stacked them inside one. The top level contains a road with 3 lanes in each direction. All are relatively smooth and straight. On the bottom level, a subway track runs like clockwork beneath a highway, and they pulled it off without the whole thing collapsing into the river. Seriously, how does it compare to other megatunnels? Let's put it in perspective. The Gotthard Base Tunnel in Switzerland is the longest rail tunnel in the world, 57 kilometers, but it doesn't have a road inside. The Channel Tunnel between the UK and France? Amazing, but still just rail. And then you've got the Tokyo Bay Aqua Line, another underwater tunnel road combo. But that one? Only 9.6 kilometers long. Jinan's tunnel? A whopping 10.9 kilometers, making it the longest 2-level tunnel under a river anywhere. Basically, China didn't just build a tunnel, they set a world record while they were at it. But here's the real genius move. By stacking the road and subway, they saved a ton of space and money. If they'd built 2 separate tunnels, costs would have skyrocketed. Instead, they engineered a solution that's smarter, cheaper, and more efficient. And the best part is that this tunnel isn't just a shortcut. It's a lifeline for millions of people who can now zip across Jinan in minutes instead of wasting time in traffic. So yeah, China just built one of the most advanced tunnels on the planet, and they made it look easy. But how exactly did they pull it off? Well, that's where things get even crazier. Because to make this tunnel happen, they had to build something even more insane. The construction process. All right, let's get one thing straight. Building any tunnel is hard, but building a 10.9-kilometer, 2-level tunnel under a river with some of the trickiest soil conditions you can imagine, that's next-level madness. And yet, China did it. They pulled billions of tons of soil out from under the Yellow River and built something that should have been impossible. Tunnels under rivers are always a nightmare to build. The water pressure is brutal, the soil shifts unpredictably. And if anything goes wrong, you're not just dealing with a leak. You're looking at a potential disaster. And the Yellow River? Oh, it's not just any river. It's one of the muddiest rivers in the world. We're talking about a river that carries 1.6 billion tons of silt every year. The ground underneath is basically a wet sponge. When researchers reported back, they warned engineers of how the ground beneath the river was unstable, unpredictable, and waiting to collapse at the first sign of trouble. So, how do you dig a tunnel through that without everything caving in? That is when the engineers brought out the big guns. They brought out a 4,100-ton tunnel-boring beast specifically designed for this job. And this thing is an absolute monster. It's 15.5 meters in diameter, big enough to swallow a double-decker bus whole. It had one mission: chew through the sludge, keep the tunnel intact, and make sure nobody gets an unexpected underground swimming lesson in the process. And here's the genius part. This machine wasn't just cutting through the soil, it was reinforcing the tunnel as it went, placing massive precast concrete segments into position while still digging forward. That meant no delays, no stopping to shore up the walls. It was all happening in real time. But even with this high-tech machine, the engineers had to deal with groundwater pressure that could crush a submarine and soil so soft that it could collapse without warning. So how did they keep everything stable? This kind of knowledge is a bit technical, but don't worry, I'll keep it simple. To stop the tunnel from collapsing, engineers pumped in a special grout mixture to firm up the ground before the machine even got there. It's like giving the soil a quick shot of concrete steroids to make it strong enough to hold its shape. Then, to stop water from flooding the tunnel, they used air pressure control. Basically, they created an artificial force inside the tunnel to push back against the water trying to rush in. Think of it as holding back a flood by blasting air into its face. And it worked. Not only did they successfully carve through the unstable sludge, but they also kept the river where it belonged, above them. But wait, there's more. Because just digging the tunnel wasn't enough. They had to connect both levels seamlessly, ensure the structure could handle thousands of vehicles, plus a subway every single day, and oh yeah, make sure the whole thing didn't shift over time. That meant reinforcing the walls with ultra-high-strength concrete, installing cutting-edge waterproofing, and using a special floating track system for the subway to reduce vibrations. And despite all these challenges, they finished ahead of schedule. So why does this matter? Because this isn't just a tunnel. It's a technological masterpiece that proves China's engineering game is on another level. By the time this thing was done, it wasn't just the longest two-level river tunnel in the world. It was a blueprint for the future of megaprojects. And guess what? The most mind-blowing part of the story is still ahead. Because of this tunnel, it's just one piece of a much bigger plan. The tunnel boring machine. What about the 4,100-ton mega machine that made this entire tunnel possible? This thing isn't just big, it's powerful and a literal ground-chewing beast, custom-built to handle one of the most dangerous, unstable, and unpredictable tunneling jobs on the planet. If you've ever seen a tunnel boring machine, those massive rotating steel cylinders with razor-sharp cutting wheels, you know they look like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? Now, this specific boring machine is like that, but on steroids. At 15.5 meters in diameter, it's wider than a 5-lane highway. That's massive. And if you stood it upright, it would be taller than a 5-story building. But here's the real kicker. It didn't just cut through the Yellow River's unstable sludge. It reinforced the tunnel while digging. That's right. This thing could excavate, support, and seal the tunnel all at once. It's like trying to dig a sandcastle underwater while simultaneously building a skyscraper inside it. How did it do that? Well, first, the front end of the machine is where the magic happens. It's got a massive rotating cutter head, which is basically a giant steel disc covered in razor-sharp, high-strength cutting teeth. These grind through rock, clay, silt, and sand, breaking everything down into manageable chunks. But here's the problem. You can't just dig through sludge and expect it to hold its shape. This isn't solid rock. It's shifting, waterlogged mud. If you dig a hole, it just collapses back in. So right behind the cutter head, the machine immediately reinforced the tunnel walls by installing massive, precast concrete segments. These were slotted into place like giant Lego blocks, creating a rock-solid tunnel lining as it advanced. That meant no dangerous cave-ins, no tunnel collapse, and zero chance of the river above coming down for a visit. But wait, it gets even crazier. Because this machine wasn't just fighting against unstable ground, it was battling intense groundwater pressure, enough force to crush a submarine if left unchecked. So, how did they stop the tunnel from flooding? The answer is simple: earth pressure balance and advanced sealing systems. The machine controlled the pressure inside the tunnel, keeping it perfectly balanced against the force of the river above. Too much pressure and the tunnel could blow out. Too little, and the water would burst in. This required absolute precision. Sensors throughout the machine constantly monitored pressure levels, soil consistency, and water seepage in real time. Engineers could adjust the machine's speed, cutting power, and pressure controls on the fly to make sure everything stayed stable. This wasn't just digging, it was surgical excavation happening kilometers below the surface. And if that wasn't impressive enough, the machine had another genius feature: a slurry transportation system. Because when you're digging through billions of tons of soil, you need a way to get rid of it. And no, you can't just shovel it into a wheelbarrow. Instead, the machine used a high-powered conveyor belt system to move the excavated material out of the tunnel, pumping out thousands of tons of slurry per hour. This meant non-stop progress, zero blockages, and maximum efficiency. For China, this wasn't just any tunnel project. This was a world-first engineering feat, using cutting-edge tech to overcome some of the most difficult tunneling conditions imaginable. By the time they finished the job, the machine had moved enough soil to fill thousands of Olympic swimming pools, and it did it faster and safer than traditional methods ever could. And that's why this machine is an absolute legend. Labor and construction challenges. How about we talk about something that never gets enough credit? The workers who actually built this thing. Because yeah, the tunnel boring machine was a beast, and the engineering was next level. But none of it would have mattered without the thousands of real people working in some of the toughest, most dangerous conditions imaginable. And trust me, this was no ordinary construction site. This job was brutal. We're talking about an environment where temperatures inside the tunnel could soar past 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity levels were through the roof, and oxygen sometimes was in short supply. Imagine spending 12-hour shifts in a cramped, dimly lit space, surrounded by heavy machinery, deafening noise, and the constant threat that something, anything, could go wrong. First, there's the high-pressure environment inside the tunnel. Workers had to deal with sudden air pressure changes, which, if not handled properly, could cause decompression sickness. Yep, the same thing deep-sea divers get when they surface too fast. Then there was the soil itself. The ground under the Yellow River is a shifting mess of soft clay, silt, and sand. This meant the risk of sudden cave-ins was always lurking in the background. If a section collapsed, it wouldn't just slow things down. It could bury workers alive. And let's not forget the constant groundwater pressure. The Yellow River isn't just a little stream. It's a raging force carrying tons of silt. If water broke through at the wrong moment, the entire tunnel could flood within minutes. And yet, they did it. Thousands of workers, day in and day out, carving their way under the river, knowing full well the risks. They had to work in rotating shifts, sometimes spending weeks underground with barely any natural light. The noise from the boring machine was relentless, so loud that even shouting right next to someone barely worked. Many workers had to live in on-site barracks, waking up before sunrise and heading straight back underground. The combination of exhaustion and stress, that takes a serious toll on the body. So how did they survive it? 2 words: insane discipline. China's mega projects operate like well-oiled machines, and safety measures are at the next level. Workers were given specialized breathing equipment, monitored for pressure sickness, and trained to handle emergency evacuations. But even with all that, the risks were still huge. And here's the crazy part. Despite everything, the heat, the pressure, the constant danger, they finished ahead of schedule. Yeah, you heard that right. Ahead of schedule. Most tunnels like this would take years longer than planned due to unexpected delays. But thanks to sheer human effort and engineering precision, they got it done faster than expected. So the next time you see a massive tunnel project like this, remember that it's not just about the fancy machines. It's about the thousands of workers who risked everything to make it happen. Timeline and milestones. You're not going to believe how fast China pulled this off. Honestly, the way this tunnel came to be is as impressive as the tunnel itself. By the time we're done, you'll see exactly why this project is such a big deal, not just for Jinan, but for infrastructure projects all over. So, let's rewind a bit. The idea for this tunnel wasn't just some random wouldn't it be nice plan. Jinan has been expanding like crazy, and the Yellow River basically cuts the city in half, making cross-river traffic a nightmare. As we have seen before this tunnel, people had to rely on a handful of bridges, all of which were prone to congestion. And a fast, direct underground route wasn't just a cool engineering challenge, but it was an absolute necessity. The project was officially approved in 2019 by the Chinese government. Still, the real action started in July 2020 when construction kicked off. And within just a few months, they had already deployed one of the most advanced tunnel boring machines in existence. Where did they get time to prepare for such a challenge? Keep in mind, this isn't some tiny road project. We're talking about a 10.9-kilometer, two-level tunnel under a river with shifting, unstable ground. Normally, something like this would take over a decade in most countries. China got it moving in months. By early 2021, excavation was in full swing, and the tunnel boring machine, that absolute beast we talked about earlier, was making serious progress. It was chewing through the riverbed at an insane pace. Records say it was around 10 meters per day. Now, 10 meters might not sound like much. Still, when you're dealing with unpredictable soil, extreme groundwater pressure, and the constant risk of collapse, it's ridiculously fast. Compare that to the typical speeds of large tunnel projects around the world, and you start to realize just how efficient this operation was. Fast forward to 2023, and the main tunnel structure was already completed. Just let that sink in. Less than 3 years after breaking ground, the bulk of the tunnel was done. That's unheard of for a project of this scale. Meanwhile, in other parts of the world, we've seen tunnels take 10, 15, or even 20 years to complete. But in Jinan, they were already moving on to the finishing touches. And that brings us to today. The tunnel is expected to open fully in 2024, which means that in just 4 years, Jinan will have one of the most advanced underground transportation systems in the world. And here's why that matters. Once this tunnel is operational, it's going to completely transform how people move around the city. It'll cut cross-river travel times from nearly an hour to just minutes. No more sitting in endless traffic on congested bridges. No more detours. Just a smooth, straight shot under the river, whether you're in a car or hopping on the subway. But the impact goes beyond just convenience. This tunnel is a game-changer for Jinan's economy. Faster commutes mean businesses can operate more efficiently, logistics improve, and new development opportunities open up. And on a larger scale, this project is setting a new benchmark for infrastructure worldwide. If China can build something this complex, this fast, what else can they do? So here's the big takeaway. This isn't just a tunnel, it's a statement. A showcase of what happens when cutting-edge engineering meets ridiculously efficient execution. And as impressive as this timeline is, the real question is, what's next? Because if this is what they can do in 4 years, imagine what's coming in the next decade. But did China just wreck the Yellow River? Let's talk about the elephant in the river and the sheer amount of soil China had to remove to make this tunnel happen. And I'm not talking about a few truckloads. We're talking about billions of tons of sediment pulled out from beneath the Yellow River. Just picture that for a second. That's like taking an entire mountain and scooping it out from under a raging body of water without the whole thing collapsing in on itself. Insane, right? But here's the real question. What did all that digging do to the river? Because you don't just remove that much earth without shaking things up. Now, obviously, they didn't do this with a couple of shovels and some wheelbarrows. They used some of the biggest, most advanced dredging equipment on the planet. These machines sucked up, dug through, and moved sediment at a mind-blowing pace. And once the soil was out, they couldn't just dump it back into the river, so they had to figure out where to put literal mountains of material. Some of it was stored in temporary holding sites, some were processed through dewatering facilities, and some were even repurposed for land reclamation projects. That's right, China turned its excavation leftovers into new land. But let's be real, removing that much soil from a riverbed was never going to be a zero-impact operation. The first problem was turbidity. That's just a fancy word for saying the water turned into a murky, muddy mess. When you disturb sediment at this scale, you don't just get a bit of dust floating around, you get massive clouds of suspended particles moving through the river system. And that's a nightmare for aquatic life. Fish that rely on clear water to spawn were left disrupted. Tiny organisms that live on the riverbed had to flee for their lives. Plus, depending on what was buried in that sediment, there was always a risk of pollutants or toxins being released into the water. But what makes this even more interesting is that China didn't just dig and hope for the best. They had serious environmental controls in place. First up, they used sediment barriers to stop silt and debris from spreading too far downstream. Then, they built water treatment facilities to filter out any pollutants before they could cause real damage. On top of that, they had teams constantly monitoring water quality, sediment movement, and ecological changes to catch any issues before they got out of hand. So, while this wasn't a completely risk-free operation, they weren't just winging it. At the end of the day, though, the big question is, was it worth it? Well, considering this tunnel is about to completely revolutionize Jinan's transportation network, you could argue that the trade-off makes sense. Sure, the riverbed took a hit, but in return, millions of people are getting a faster, more efficient way to move through their city. And remember, the Yellow River isn't exactly a pristine, untouched wilderness. It's already one of the most heavily engineered waterways in the world. The challenge was never about keeping it 100% untouched, but about making sure that any damage was controlled, managed, and, where possible, reversed. So, was the process messy? Absolutely. Did China take steps to minimize the damage? Yes. And is this tunnel going to change Jinan forever? Without a doubt. The real test now is whether the river can fully bounce back, and given how much effort went into monitoring and mitigation, there's a good chance it will. But what do you think? Was this a necessary sacrifice for progress? Or do you think projects like this push the limits of what we should be doing to natural ecosystems? Were the results worthwhile? All right, so after everything we've covered, from the mind-blowing engineering and the insane amount of soil they moved to the sheer scale of this project, we have to ask ourselves, was it all worth it? Did China's decision to carve a tunnel under the Yellow River really pay off? Or did they just create a massive, expensive problem for themselves? Okay, first off, from a practical point of view, this tunnel is a game changer. A few years back, crossing the Yellow River in Jinan was a huge nightmare. Every time, bridges choked up, hindering transport. Not to mention the ridiculous travel times and a transport system that just couldn't keep up with the city's rapid growth. Right now, they've got a direct, ultra-efficient route that slashes cross-river commutes from nearly an hour to just a few minutes. That's thousands of hours saved every single day, making life easier for millions of people. And that's just the beginning. Economically, the tunnel is expected to supercharge Jinan's development. Faster transport means better business opportunities, smoother supply chains, and a huge boost for industries on both sides of the river. Property values are already climbing, investors are paying attention, and suddenly Jinan isn't just some mid-tier city, it's becoming a powerhouse for trade and urban growth. But here's where things get tricky because let's be real. Pulling billions of tons of soil out of a riverbed doesn't exactly scream eco-friendly. When you mess with an ecosystem this massive, there are bound to be consequences. The Yellow River is already one of the most turbulent, silt-heavy rivers in the world, and digging a tunnel underneath it was like performing open-heart surgery on a patient with a wildly unpredictable pulse. The good news is that China wasn't reckless about this. They planned ahead with mitigation strategies, things like sediment control, reinforced tunnel linings, and ongoing environmental monitoring. But let's not sugarcoat it. No project this big comes without risks. Long-term effects on the river's flow and surrounding habitats are still being studied. And if something goes wrong down the line, like unexpected erosion or shifts in water patterns, it could trigger a whole new set of challenges. So was it worth it? Honestly, it depends on how you look at it. If you're thinking purely in terms of economic progress, this tunnel is a massive win. It's fast, it's efficient, and it's setting a new standard for large-scale infrastructure. But if you're more concerned about environmental sustainability, the jury's still out. The full impact of this project might not be clear for decades. If we start seeing major ecological shifts in the Yellow River, people might look back and wonder if the cost was too high. That's where you come in. What do you think? Do the benefits of the Jinan Yellow River Tunnel outweigh the risks? Or should we be more cautious when taking on projects of this scale? Drop your thoughts in the comments.